Okay. Get comfortable. I'm waiting for you. Okay. I wanted to talk about a relatively common din in Hilchos Shabbos and in Yonah Hadlakas Neiros, but I wanted to maybe frame it a little differently than maybe you've heard in the past and work with it like that. The din that I want to talk about is the din that if a woman forgets to light a candle for Hadlakas Neiros, she's mechuyev to light an extra one, for the rest of her life. Now, I just want to give a drop of a background. In the Tkufas Rishonim, it's famously known as the Tshuva of the Rekeach, but it's not really only the Rekeach. It's many contemporary Rishonim of the Rekeach. But the Tshuva of the Rekeach has it in the whole Kuntras HaTshuva. Others have it, more dispersed. Others have it for specific Averis. But the Rekeach had a whole system of doing Tshuva in what we would consider a very extreme manner, but in a very it's referred to as Tshuvas HaMishkal, which meant basically there was a few ways to calculate it, but either you have to figure out how much hana you had from the Aveira and then replace it with that amount of negative, or what the Einish would look like and then try to mimic the Einish, or what the Gehenim would look like, try to mimic the Gehenim. The Rekeach has many different Ifanim of the Tshuvas HaMishkal that he describes, and there's many different knases that could be put on a person for doing various Aveiras. If you take a look in the Rekeach, in the Sefer Hilchos Tshuva, the Rekeach has very explicit prescriptions for many different, garden variety Averis, meaning something you would do without even thinking about it, and the Rekeach will have an extensive, sometimes several months worth of specific, things you have to do to be mechaper for that Aveira. So the Rekeach has, something very, very explicit, but many other Rishonim agreed with him in his time and had similar Mishnah Satshuva like the Rekeach. Now, there was many knosses that were involved. For example, a famous one that actually came up many times was if a person would do an Aveira, they would force him to shave his head or to shave his beard. This is in the times when no one shaved, this is a tremendous bizayin, to have to shave your beard or your head, and people would be very bothered by it. This was a big knas, a big einish to put on someone. Now, eventually, if you'll open a Shulchan Aruch today, in halachas all over Dal Chak Shulchan Aruch, for a person who doesn't have Aveira, b'shegig, b'mezid, you're going to find kemat no einshim. Almost all of these knases and these einshim that the Rishonim used to impose on people for doing specific Averis are gone, are not in the Shulchan Aruch B'chlal. The Mechaber doesn't bring any of them down, kemat, and the Ramah, who was Kilu bringing the Ashkenazi Mesorah into the Shulchan Aruch, and the Ashkenazi Mesorah has a lot of these einshim in it, only has einshim in two places. The Ramah has an einish in Hilchos Shabbos. The Ramah says that if a person is B'chal Shabbos B'shegig, he should do a certain amount of Tanesim, Beis V'hei. If he's not able to do the Tanesim, he should give a certain amount that's stuck in place of it. And the Ramah in Hilchos Nida has that if a person is Boil Nida B'shegig, he has a certain, say that tshuva that the Ramah has of different fasts and money and etc. So even the Ramah, who was Kilu infusing the Shulchan Aruch with all these Minhagei Ashkenaz, and the Minhagei Ashkenaz are replete with different extreme methods of tshuva, chooses to almost completely leave this out, and he doesn't go there at all. Now, one of the places where it slips in, because it's very minor and it's not so extreme, it slips in over here in Hilchos Shabbos, L'gabei Hadlakas Neiros. Now, I just want to say a story, an interesting story that really shows the pivot away from these type of einshim, even amongst the Tshuvas Svar, amongst the Gdei Poskim. I want to tell you a story about a person whose name was Etel Schneier. He was a upstanding member of society in the town of Afen, which is a Hungarian town. We're talking in the 1500s, early 1500s. He was like a Parnas in the town of Afen in Hungary, and the way it's brought down in some very high-line tshuvas, to quote this story. The Maram of Padua, who's the Ramah's cousin, who was the Gadol Adar B'Shaita, talks about this person's life story. The Shailas Tshuvas Kan Aaron, from Rav Aaron of Constantinople, talks about the Shaila, meaning this story made waves. So Etel Schneier was a person, he was a prominent person, and he at some point was on business in the capital of Vienna, in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and he, in a moment of weakness, he strayed, and he did something with someone that he wasn't supposed to do something with, and he was caught. Now, here's where the story diverges. If you look in this Kan Aaron's version of the story, this Kan Aaron says that because this woman came from a very prominent family, the family said that unless he converts to Catholicism, unless Etel Schneier converts, they're going to punish him extremely severely. Maybe they'll even kill him. And because of the pressure, he couldn't hold himself back, and he converted to Catholicism and became a Catholic. The way the Maram Padva says the story, and this is brought down in other sources, he says it a little different. He says something interesting. The Maram Padva says that the Jewish Kehillah, his Chaverim, found out about the story, what happened with him, and they told him that if he's not going to shave his head and his beard completely and come back into Afen and be seen, completely shaved, then they're not going to let him back in. He's going to lose everything. And because he was so afraid of the bizayin of having to shave his head and his beard, he left it completely, and he went on and became a Catholic. Now, the interesting end plot of his story, and the reason why we know about it is because as follows. The Trumas Hadeshin has a psak, and this is another knas, like we're talking about. The Trumas Hadeshin has a psak, that if someone goes off the derech, at whatever age it is, when you call up his children for an aliyah, you don't call his children Ben so-and-so. Meaning if Moshe goes off the derech, you don't say, call up the son Ben Moshe. You say Ben either the grandfather or Ben Avram Avinu, like a ger. We excise this person who went off the derech from the lineage, and that's like a knas, that's a punishment, meaning your children are not even going to be called on your name. This is an interpretation of Shem Rishon Yerkov. It's like an extension of the Shem Rishon Yerkov, based on a Sefer Hasidim. The Sefer Hasidim seems to say something like this, and based on this, the Trumas Hadeshin paskins halacha l'maisa, that if a person goes off the derech, you don't call his children by his name anymore. Now, the Ramah in a Tshuva, in Tshuva Yud, in Shut Ramah, the Ramah is already makel on this psak. But the shaila that came to this Kanaran, the Rampadva, was that this person, this Etel Shneir who went off the derech, was a chashva person, a well-known person. He had several children who were living in Afen, and they wanted to know if they could be called up to get aliyas by his name. And because of that shaila, these poskim discuss, the life story of Etel Shneir. Now, they write that although he converted, he always maintained a really soft spot for his brethren, for the Jews. And every time he would hear of something that was going wrong, in the king's court or in the nobles' palaces where he dreizich, he would always intercede on behalf of his fellow compatriots. And Ad Kedei Kach, as Kanaran writes, that one time he was so much accused of dual loyalty, meaning of being loyal to his old Jewish brethren instead of his new Catholic religion, that they were married him Migdulasei, they almost threatened to kill him. And he writes that it cost him, an inordinate amount of money to buy his stature back, so that he could still participate in an upstanding society in Vienna where he lived now. He writes specific stories of Pidin Shvuyin that he did. The Rampadva has his own version of the great things, and the Skan Aaron throws in that some Seif, he heard from people who were there that when he died, this Etel Shneir called together a minyan of Frum Yidden, and he was misfadim with tears and crying, and he died like a Frum Jew. So therefore they both go on to say that even though Etel Shneir strayed and he went away, you could still really call his children by his name, and they're allowed to get aliyas. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting the story is only because it's an example of the downside of extreme knossos. The way the Rampadva says it, Etel Shneir was just not able to withstand the punishment that was coming his way. Meaning, because what I'm saying is 1524 was 2024 already. Meaning, in comparison to the really strict einshim of the Deiros from 500 years before them, the Gedolei HaPoskim in the 1500s were saying people can't handle this anymore. If you push them too far, they're going to not be able to handle it. The Ramah in Hilchos Nadarim says this about putting someone in Nidoi. This is what the Rampadva is saying. So because of this shift in what people are able to handle, what the perspective is, these extreme einshim and knossos that were put on people as a kapara for specific averis eventually fades away in this tkufa. Now, one that slips through the crack, and the reason why it slips through the crack is because it's really not such a big deal, is this Ramah. The Ramah in Reish Samach Gimel, Sif Aleph, in Hilchos Shabbos, the Ramah writes as follows, and really it starts earlier, but the Ramah writes as follows. The Ramah says like this. The Ramah says that, he says like this, he says, Ha'isha sheshachcha pamachas lahadlik, a woman who forgets to light one time, madlekes kol yemea gimel neiros. She has to be meisif a third ner for her whole life, because you're allowed to add. The Ramah brings this down. Now, where this comes from is a Maril. The Maril has a shaila. The Maril in Hilchos Shabbos, in the collection of the Maril in Hilchos Shabbos, he says that his niece asked him a shaila. It's brought down that the Maril's niece asked him a shaila. She said, I was fanumin, I forgot what time Shabbos was, and before I knew it, Shabbos was here, and I forgot to be madlik neiros. So it says, I'll read it for you. It says, Nishal basa choyse de Mari Segel. The Maril's sister's daughter asked him, Al Isha de Mitchela sheshakcha sheshagagav lehedlikin ar Shabbos. She was misrashel, and that's important. She was, misrashel, she was lazy. She did something wrong. That's an important clarification here. Sheshagagav lehedlikin ar Shabbos. She forgot the light. V'hayrula, the Maril was married to her. She should keep in all ner mitzvah from now on. She should be meisif more than she was until now. And Umasai She'ira, the anniversary of when this took place, whatever Shabbos it was, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. When her tanesim fall out, when her pre-designated tanesim fall out, she should include this in the things that she needs to do tshuva for, and she should fast and be misvada for this avera. If she wants to add on some more tanesim for missing her adlakas neir, and to, sigufim, I don't know what the exact English translation of sigufim is, but to hurt herself, to put herself through some sort of rigorous, pain, extra credit, this is the Maril's psak. Now this Maril is very much in the vein of the knossos of old, meaning of taking each aver, trying to figure out exactly what the methodology for mechaper on it is, and imposing some really strict system to be mechaper for it. So Rama says something, the Maril is saying two things. He's saying, first of all, tanesim, sigufim, which is the basic, underlying briach hatachton of all kapara and onshim and knas. And second of all, he says something which is pretty extreme. For the rest of your life, always be madlik extra. Now it's extreme A because it's something for the rest of your life, it's extra, and B, it's slightly embarrassing. Anytime someone's going to walk in and see this woman being madlik neiris, the person will know right away, you have meaning, whatever the minig is, let's say she's from a family that lights 2, she's lighting 4, okay, you obviously missed 2 times. If her minig is to light for each child, okay, you do the cheshbon, so it's embarrassing for this person, she's going to be caught. Now what's interesting is that the Ramah in Darkei Moshe, when he brings this on the Torah, the Ramah machzir avek. The Darkei Moshe, where the Ramah brings this, he says that the Maril says a knas like this, but I don't really. He says this is where he says chumra. He says this is just a chumra rechaika, and I don't really stand with this. But what should I do? He says anashim noyig is kedivir Maril. The minig that the women self-imposed upon themselves is to keep this Maril. So the Ramah, in vain of the Ramah throughout the rest of Shulchan Aruch, is trying to delete a knas and an einish, like an extra legal einish, for an Aveira, like he does all over the rest of Shulchan Aruch. But he says, what can I do over here? The minig, the women, the Nashim Tzidkanis, they want to keep this extra knas on themselves, and I can't take it out. And therefore the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch, and Reish Samach Gimel, the Ramah imposes the knas, and says that a lady who forgot to light candles for 1 week, should be makbid to add a candle for the rest of her life. Now, because this is a knas, and like the Ramah says, like his words are, that it's a chumra rechaika, there's some, nafkaminas ladina over here, that come out. Now, I just want to be myself Omer Nakuda. There is a tzad in the Paiskim, in some Paiskim, that the reason why there's this like chumra rechaika, why we say this by women, that they should be madlik and extra light, is because if you look in the Gemara in Shabbos, the Gemara in Shabbos brings several reasons for adlakas neiros. We've spoken about this before Pesach, but the Gemara in Shabbos brings several reasons. Some of them is just for Einik Shabbos, which is a deraisa, for Shalom Bayis, which is probably also a deraisa. But the third one, and this one doesn't make it to Shulchan Aruch, but it is something the Rishonim will bring down, the Mishnah Berurah brings it down, is he kav sa'ir shalaylam. Chava extinguished the light of the world by feeding Adam Rishon from the Eitz Hadas, so therefore she has to be lighting the candles of, relighting the candles of the world. And that's why the woman does it. We spoke maybe before Pesach that's why it's a mitzvah hanashim, so to speak, meaning women get priority when it comes to adlakas neiros over the men. The man is mechuyev, like the Rambam says, like the Shulchan Aruch says, a man's mechuyev in adlakas neiros just like a woman's mechuyev in adlakas neiros. But since women have this extra connection, he kavsa sa'ir shalaylam, and this is her way of doing tshuva for it, so she gets priority. Now there are those who say that since this entire thing, the reason why a woman gets priority for adlakas neiros is because he kavsa sa'ir shalaylam, and this is a tshuva. So if she neglects her achrayis of doing tshuva for it, it makes perfect sense that she should have to increase her doing tshuva for this. Meaning this is very much connected to tshuva in the first place for women. So maybe it makes sense extra why the Ramah would let this through. Now, yir shia and afkamina of this being a knas is as follows. Let's say, and this the Magen Avraham already says, let's say a woman was not, if you remember, I was medayik, the Maril says, v'nisrashla. She was lazy. She wasn't doing it carefully. So says the Magen Avraham, if a person was extra careful, they're doing everything right, but an einus arose and they weren't able to do it, so then they wouldn't have the knas. So like Magen Avraham Mashal says, a woman who has a baby and isn't able to light a candle it's not a problem. She doesn't have to be meisif one. Meaning that's an einus. She doesn't have to be meisif one. Modern day poskim say if someone was budgeted enough time to go away for Shabbos, ended up getting stuck in traffic, and they got there already, after adlakas neiros time, you don't have to be meisif one because that's an einus. That's nothing that they could have done wrong. Now I'll just note, it's interesting to note this, is that I think today by a lot of parts of Klal Yisrael, the minig is that for every child that a person has, the woman's meisif a candle. Now Me'ikar Adin, the Shulchan Aruch says we do it al zachav v'shamar. 2 candles, zachav v'shamar, 2 candles, that's it. There's others that say 10 keneged aseres hadibris, 7 keneged the days of the week, but the minig that became nafutz in Klal Yisrael is light 1 for each child. Now there is no real good makar for that, meaning it's very unclear where that minig really started. There's not like it's not in the Shulchan Aruch, it's not in the Rambam, it's not in the Gedolei Rishonim. Where that minig starts from, to Mosif, one for each child, is a shtickle milsa d'tmiyah. I saw Reb Menashe Klein, and the Tshuva says that, in contrast to this Magen Avraham, he says the minig is, because Hayos, when women had children, in those days, they were actually bedridden, so you were bound to miss a week of lighting. Every time a woman would have a child, she was bound to miss a week of lighting. So every time you miss one, you add one. Like the Ramah says, every time you miss one, you add one. So the minig became that every time you had a child, you added, and that became the minig. This is Reb Menashe Klein, and Tshuva says this. It's interesting because it's in direct conflict to the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham is lahedya ruling out that. The Magen Avraham is saying, anytime it's an einus, you don't have to. He's saying the minig gufa comes from that. This is like an afkamina of it being a knas. Here the Magen Avraham holds that it's only a knas. It doesn't be, the Magen Avraham says clearly, you don't find knasis on things that are not your fault. Meaning, einus rachmana patri. If you're not able to do it, l'naira le'sasadavar, she's pater. We don't have knasis for something that's not your fault. Now, another nafkamina is as follows. The Pri Megadim has a grace of chumrah, and the Mishabur is already chelik in this. Pri Megadim has a grace of chumrah. Let's say for our minig, let's say l'mashal, where a person lights for each child. The woman has 6 children. Her normal candle lighting is supposed to be 8 neiros she's supposed to light, and she only lights 6. So she didn't really forget, because Me'ikar then she was Mekayim Hadlakas Neiros, K'maisha Kasav, Zachav V'Shamar, she did 2 candles. But she missed the additional candles that because of her minig, she does. So the Pri Megadim has a big chumrah. The Pri Megadim says that if a person misses even any of the extra candles, she's mechuyev to be meisef a new candle instead of that. Even missing an extra is considered missing. Comes along the Be'er Halacha, and the Be'er Halacha brings the sources that say it's a knas ba'alma, it's just a punishment, and the Be'er Halacha says, Havalanu d'lei noisef. It's a knas. It's a chumrah yiseir, like the Ramah writes. There's no reason to be meisef on this knas. And if a person, me'ikar adin, was yoytzer her chiyav hadlaka, she lit all the basic candles, she just didn't get the extra, we're not going to cancel her on top of that. And this is the Mishabura, and most of the modern day places hold like this Mishabura. In general, you'll see in this Inyan, any suffix, so to speak, in this knas, the place are mekel. Like halacha beknas zul lekula. Because hayos it's a knas, and the way the Ramah himself writes it, that it's a chomer yisera, we're mekel. Ad kedei kach, Bavadia in a tshuva and in his Sefer Nechel Shabbos, Bavadia writes that hayos today, bisman hazeh, everyone has lights on in their house. And me'ikar adin, you could be yoytze most of the dinim of hadlakas neiros with lights. And even though you didn't even turn on those lights b'kavana, and it might not have been the woman who turned them on, but if there is lights that are on in the house for Shabbos, already you can make it, you don't have to do the knas. So meaning the place are very, very makel about this knas, because it's only a knas, because it's something, it's a, quote to speak, it's like an outdated mode of punishment, meaning it's one of these rare things that snuck in that isn't the usual method. Now, there's one more nakud over here about this thing that I want to discuss that's very interesting. On Yom Kippur, the minig is we light a candle. The Ramah brings every person, every adult, lights a ner neshama on Yom Kippur. Now, already based on the Gemara in Hayriyos, it's mashma, that ner is like a siman for how your year is going to go. If the ner goes out, it means the person will have a bad year. And if the ner burns well over Yom Kippur, then they can have a good year. They have nothing to worry about. Now, the Gemara says this as like it's one of the simana milsa things, like in Rosh Hashanah simana milsa, which usually implies that it's more of a tefillah than an actual siman. Meaning you light the candle as like a physical tefillah that I should have a good year. Just like when you eat pomegranate seeds on Rosh Hashanah by night, it's not, the achil is not the siman, it's the yihiratzin. You say, I'm going to eat this to yihiratzin, I should have a year that's going to remind me of this. So this comes from the same Gemara, and generally it means like an aspirational siman. It's a tefillah for a siman. So but the Ramah brings this down, and based on this, there was the Ramah and Paiskim bring down, there's a big fear that if a person's candle goes out on Yom Kippur, then it's a siman rala, he's going to have a bad year. And based on that, the halacha became, and this the Ramah brings down, that if a person's candle that he lit, his ner neshama, goes out on Yom Kippur, he should light it up after Yom Kippur again, and let it burn out, uninterrupted, to make up for what happened. Now, so the Paiskim handle, the Machne Chaim son, it's a very recent child. The Machne Chaim son, it's about 100 years ago. The Machne Chaim son, I think it's called, I forgot what it's called, the Sefer, Teres Chaim, the Sefer is called. In the Teres Chaim, which is the Machne Chaim son, he has a child. Let's say a woman lights candles for Shabbos, and the candles go out early, prematurely. They don't burn out, they go out. Now this is something that's very common. Candles could go out all the time. He says, so do you import Yenis Svara from Yom Kippur? That just like by Yom Kippur, when the candles go out, it's like a siman ra. It means your candle didn't burn right. Do you say you have to light it up here again, and therefore it's like as you missed it, and you should do it again for the rest of your life. Add another candle. Now he says if a woman's candle goes out, she should add a candle for the rest of her life again. It's like as if your candle went and you should add it. Now I just want to point out in a kudah like this, that if you look in Hilchos Yom Kippur, Ephraim Zal Margolius and the Chayadam and the Goyin is mashma like this, they all say as follows, that if the candle was in a place where there's a window or a door, somebody came to brush too close to it and the candle goes out, then avada there's nothing to worry about. The Ephraim Zalman in his sefer on the Yom Neroim, he's machmer about it more than everybody else. In Elef Lamata, in a long shtickle there, he says that if it's circumstantial, the candle got blown out. Everyone understands a candle could get blown out. Big deal. It got blown out. Someone blew it out, or the wind came, or you brushed into it. He says the danger, the simana milsa that the Gemara is referring to over there, is only if for no reason. Meaning you have your candle sitting in like a protected box. There's absolutely no reason for it to go out, and it went out. That's like a scary simon. That's a simana milsa. That's something that frightens people. They have to worry about a bad year. So Memela, he says, this minig that the Ramah says that if it goes out, you should be yiddig and you should light it again, is only if it went out for absolutely no reason. But if it went out because of some circumstantial reason, and that's most cases, most times the candle goes out for a reason, so there's nothing to worry about. Disregard the worries, nothing to worry about. And the Chayadim brings like this. So meaning the Paiskim, the later Paiskim, very much minimize the time that a person has to worry about a candle that went out. Now, by Hilchas Shabbos, by Hilchas Shabbos, I would say, I lost my train of thought here for a second. By Hilchas Shabbos, I would say it's the opposite. Meaning, that's what I'm saying. So over here, where we're talking about the candle going out due to negligence. The Maril spoke about the only reason when there's a knas is when it's due to negligence. If a person forgot to. A person was lazy and they didn't make it happen properly. So, if the candle goes out over here due to any one of these other occurrences, like the Matafraim is discussing, there'd be no reason to light another one. There was zero negligence. A person lit the candle, you did your candle. Meaning this whole knas is built upon negligence. Over there, the reason to light it up again, the reason to worry is when it goes out for no reason. Over here, if you did everything you're supposed to when it goes out, there's no reason to shal too. And most places can say that if the candle goes out or anything like that, a woman does not have to be moisev another candle. So in general, like we discussed, most of the times over here, the halach is to be mekel because it's one of these knases. But it's interesting that this is a knas of old that slipped in to this, plain din in Hilchas Shabbos. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.